Hello, everybody.
All right, and the live stream is going, so I will let you have at it.
Okay, welcome everyone. I am so glad you are all here. Thank you so much for joining in this free webinar. I got a lot of information for you, and I do want to leave some time at the end for Q&A. And so let's get into it so that we have more time for you to ask any questions that you might have. And Maihan, you're still there with me? It looks like there's still people that are waiting to get in.
Yep, they are slowly joining in now.
They're slowly joining in.
I will be keeping an eye on that for you, so you can do whatever it is that you want to do.
Whatever it is that I'm going to do. Okay, great. Okay, so you guys, I'm going to just start by sharing my screen with you. And I've noticed that I've got this presentation in Canva, and Canva's been acting kind of weird today. I lost like a bunch of images and had to start the whole presentation over again. So hopefully it's going to be okay. I know there's a little bit of lag, but if you can let me know in the chat if you're able to see the screen. I see 1, 2, 3 thumbs up. Okay, we're going good. If you can't, you'll let us know also, right? Okay.
Looks good.
Looks good. So here we go. And please just write your questions down and I will get to them at the end, but there's so much information that I want to cover in this that I want to get on a roll, but of course we can't get into every single thing, but we're going to do the best we can. How about that? Yeah. So you are in the right place if you use your voice creatively and professionally, which actors and voice talent do, right? So there could be some people in here that who are in the storytelling industry, maybe possibly comedians and impersonators. I work with all kinds of voice artists. So you're in the right place. Also, if you want to learn how to critically listen to your voiceover audition recordings or any other type of recordings, because I think we just kind of may get in a rut for listening to the wrong things. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But you want to be able to improve your submissions, whether that's for voiceover, on-camera work, or whatever. And you want to add interest to your performance. And so I'm going to talk to you about how you can kind of fine-tune your ear in order to do that. And of course, if you just want to learn more about your voice, which is, you know, that's my life thing here. If we're talking about the voice, I can get kind of geeked out on it, but I'm going to try not to go too far into the weeds with you guys tonight, but I do want to get some information to you. All right, so here's what I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to talk to you about why listening in very specific ways is beneficial to you as far as your performance and also in auditioning, and to how that it can improve the quality of your auditions altogether. I want to talk to you about how audiences hear you. This is based on a lot of scientific research I've done over the last 13 years. I'm going to talk to you about listening to yourself, what to listen for, what to do, and what not to do. All of it's going to kind of be jam-packed in there together. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about me. I've used my voice in so many ways over the years. I started really in television doing news, and I was an anchor and a reporter, and I also had a talk show for a while. And I'll get into, the talk show is kind of what led me into getting into this research. But I've also traveled internationally as a motivational speaker. I've done professional development training in the corporate world. And well, not recently, back in 2015 is when I actually earned a PhD in communication. And my specialty was voice and film. So technically, my degree says communication, but I am a film scholar and a voice scholar. In my research, I created a theory called Sonic Vocality, and it's a theory about how actors use their voices to create characters. So that's really kind of where all this started. I've taught at a university for many years, and I have probably 30 different media and communication courses in my teaching portfolio. And then for the real fun and the real job of my life, it's voiceover and acting. So that's kind of where I am. I've done a lot of different things. And these images you see over here to the right are kind of me in a bunch of different roles. And you can see here with the high hair and the news anchor set, we won't talk about what year that was, but we'll just be moving right along. All right, so what happened with me building my knowledge and experience in voice and in voiceover, when I was hosting a talk show in California, I was actually up in the Bay Area at KTVU in the San Francisco market, and it really hurt me to talk. That's not good for a person who's hosting a talk show, but that's kind of what led me to get help. But I was really just going to a vocal coach to get help with the pain. But while I was doing that, something else happened, like voiceover. And I just had so much fun with that. And I was happy doing it for a long time. But I was always so very curious about the voice, specifically the spoken human voice. So after I'd done voiceover for a long time, I started coaching and helping other people who were interested in voiceover and public speaking. So that's kind of where I got into the coaching part. But it was still not enough. I was still so very curious about the voice. And that's what led me to earn a PhD in communication. And it was kind of difficult because there weren't any courses or programs specifically in the performance of the spoken human voice. There was plenty out there if I wanted to get into the clinical part and, learning about, the anatomy and physiology and diseases and all that kind of thing. But that's not really what I wanted to do. I just really wanted to study the spoken human voice and performance. So I was allowed to kind of create my own program. I earned my PhD from Georgia State University in Atlanta. This is where I'm based. And so that kind of led to a lot of different things and where I actually did the scientific research and created the theory. So this is kind of where I am right now, but I want to give you the quick, fast, dirty version of 13 years of research. Okay. So what happened was in order for me to create this theory, I created an experiment, and the experiment was I found 5 pairs of matched films. Now, when I say matched films, I mean like an original movie and a remake. So like the Thomas Crown Affair and the remake, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and the remake, Sabrina, the remake, A Raisin in the Sun, a remake. So I had 5 of those pairs of films. And then I set up 3 separate focus groups. One focus group, I showed clips that I had pulled from the pairs of films. So I would go in and I edited out areas where the dialogue was the same or very similar, right? And so I showed one focus group those clips as they were produced with visual and audio. And then a second focus group, I showed the clips with only visuals. They had no sound. And then the third group had an audio version, but they had no visuals. And I asked them all the same questions. I asked, what do you know about the character? What did you learn about the character? What do you understand about the character? Because I was trying to figure out who gets most information from the actors or from the film. Is it based on what you see and hear combined as we experience movies today? Or is it based on just what you see? Or is it based on just what you hear? And so I'm just going to ask, and I'd like to see what everybody puts in the chat. Which group do you think got the most information about the characters? Is it based on their visual and audio experience as we watch movies? Or is it just the visual group who had no sound? Or was it just the audio group who had no visuals? So what do you think? And Myhan, since you can see the chat and I can't, can you let me know what's coming up in the chat, what people are thinking about?
Yeah, a lot of people are saying audio and visual, and we have some visual, but it looks like most people are saying audio.
Most people are saying audio. Okay, well, that is what happened. It was the audio group who got the most information about the characters. As a matter of fact, they got 10.2 times more information. Now, see, that's really scientific for me to say 10.2, right? 10.2 times more information than the group that experienced the film with sound and visuals, and the group that's just watched it combined together. So it was amazing to find out what kinds of things that the people who were just listening caught, right? They picked up on things the other two groups never even noticed. So that was really wonderful to find out. But that was not where the real gold was in the study. The real gold came from all of the details that they gave me about how they understood characters. And this was the basis for the whole theory, which is called Sonic Vocality. And it turns out that there are 12 elements that are used by us when we're speaking that they understood and received information about the characters. And so I'm going to go over this with you. Now, this diagram on the right is a radial mind map. And the mind map, I put it in this format just to be able to use it and for it to be more effective. When I originally wrote up the research, for academic research, it's very boring. And so I wanted actors and voice talent to be able to use the research that I had spent so much time working on. So the 12 elements, as you see, are on the outer ring of this circle. And the inner ring, I put them into categories really to help myself so that I could remember them and work through them. And that's what you see with these color codes. The colors match the 5 different categories. So I'll go through this really quickly with you. The first element is breath, and it's in a category by itself because your voice is really functioning on your breath. You breathe for life, to stay alive, and then you breathe for speech. So breath is really important. It's the foundation, and it's the reason you have a voice, and it's the reason you can speak. The second category is pitch. Pitch is also in a category by itself because the pitch of your voice is determined by the length and the thickness of your vocal folds. And so a lot of times, this is not true 100% of the time, but many times women have longer, thinner vocal folds, and so their pitches are higher. And then there are some males that have thicker, shorter vocal folds, which causes a person to have a lower tone. So pitch is in a category by itself. Now you can do things to play with your pitch. I can push my pitch up here like this, but I can't sustain it for a long time. And if I do try to sustain it for a long time, I'll be very fatigued and I could, damage my vocal folds over a long period of time. So your natural pitch is kind of where it falls with you just, breathing and speaking normally. The next category is inflection. And by the way, I named the categories based on the first element of that category. So the category inflection includes inflection, emphasis, and volume. And you can kind of see how those work together, those 3 elements. The next category is fluency, and it includes fluency, pace, pause, rate, and rhythm. And you can see how these go together. This is really more about the musicality in your voice, the musicality of speech. And then the 5th category is articulation, and it includes articulation and pronunciation. So these are things that we use every day in our speech, but as artists, you can play with them in any kind of combination, right? I wish I invented these, I didn't, but we use them every day and we're able to communicate and we're able to understand one another based on these 12 elements. So this is the basis and the foundation of the theory Sonic Vocality. And it is also the basis of why I started paying attention to how we listen and how we critique ourselves when we're, submitting an audition, whether it's video, but in particular, when it's audio, because we're sometimes with the pay-to-play sites, what I found is a lot of voiceover artists just rip the script and read it, right? They're just trying to get in as many auditions as possible, but they may not be listening for the right things when it comes to judging whether this is a good submission or not. So that's really what I want to get into with you in more detail. But this research and this theory is what led me into studying how people listen and then how other members of the audience receive whatever it is that we're saying. So the reason listening is so important is because you learn to speak based on what and how you hear. So we in America speak English for the most part, but why is it that people maybe in the UK, they also speak English, but they pronounce words differently, right? We're all speaking English. So have you ever given that a bunch of any consideration? It's like we all say hello, how are you? But it sounds so different, right? So it's based on how we hear. So your voice and the way you sound, you learned that based on how you hear. And so your voice is directly connected to your hearing. And you've probably heard of ENT doctors, ear, nose, and throat doctors. They specialize in hearing and voice and speech. And so you can't really separate the two. But I think as voice artists, a lot of times what we do is we focus mostly on the voice, and we're not really aware or that aware of how it is connected to our hearing, and then how we can use our hearing to improve our voice, to improve the vocal instrument, to improve our auditions and submissions and so forth. So all of the things that are in your body that allow you to create speech and sound are working together. And so there are really four main parts quickly. It's respiration, which is about your inhalation and exhalation. Respiration, phonation, which happens in the vocal folds. Resonation, which happens in different cavities of the body, including your mouth, your nasal cavity, your sinus cavities, in your larynx, in your throat, and in your chest. So those areas create resonating areas. And then articulation. And that's where your lips, your teeth, your tongue are able to shape the sound and the speech. So all of those things are working together at the same time. And there's a lot going on in your body to allow you to be able to create sound, control it, and manipulate it. So the whole benefit of you learning more about listening is that it helps you to expand your vocal range. It will help you to just be able to do a lot more with your voice. It helps you create more refined vocal techniques, especially when it comes to the creation of character. And so I'm going to be doing some classes in the future about using your voice to create characters, because that was really what the research was based on. And so I'm really excited about that. But I'm also doing a more in-depth class about these elements in your voice in January. We'll give you some more information about that at the end. But listening also helps you have a better command and control of your vocal instrument and all of those parts that make it work. So respiration, phonation, resonation, articulation, it will help you with that. And it also allows you to take note of what may need adjusting, or if you're trying to do a certain role or a certain performance or create a specific type of character. So listening and refining your listening and refining your ear is really, really important. And then finally, it helps you to tap into all those things that causes the audiences to hear you, to listen to you, to receive what you're saying and understand what you're saying. So, there's so much that we can hear, but we may not really be listening to. And that is one thing that I really picked up from the focus group research, is that, when we have visuals and audio elements mixed together, we're kind of selective about what we process and take in. And because we know how to watch movies or television shows, or if we go to a play, we understand a lot about how the performance and the messages are given to the audience. But it's really important to know that people hear differently, they listen differently, they receive information differently, right, based on their personal experiences, and they understand differently. So if you're able, as an artist who uses their voice, if you're able to really control and fine tune what you're saying and how you're saying it in order to make connections with your audience or whoever happens to be listening, then you're way ahead of the game. So when it comes to auditioning, you're first trying to get the casting director, you're trying to get to the client, you're trying to get, before you even get to audiences. So I still like to look at casting directors, producers and directors and clients as the audience, because they're kind of like the gatekeepers to the real audience, right? And so before your voice even gets to those ears, it has to get through a couple of other tests. So those are important tests, right? So the whole point of this listening thing is to be able to make meaningful connections. And I'm going to talk to you about some real specific things in connections, not only with your body, but with the audience. But don't forget, right? And I'll kind of remind you about this often, is that your hearing is directly connected to your voice. So that's the first major connection that you should be aware of. And then special connections, if you're not really listening for the right things, can get lost because you may not be checking for or listening for those elements in your recording when you hit submit. So it's kind of a lot to process at one time. So I have a way to help you get through all this. And it does take time. It does take a little tuning of the ear, but it's not anything that we can't handle, right? Okay, so the first thing I want to focus on is what you should not be listening for, right? So, you know, when you listen to your recording before you hit submit, it's kind of a special skill, right? You're not listening, or you should not be listening, just to determine whether you sound good or not. You know, you play it back and you're like, oh, I sound pretty good on that. Okay, that's not what we're listening for. We're also not listening for stumbles or mistakes, because we can all read. And if you read through the script, when you're doing your recording, you know if you messed up or not, right? You know if you made that stumble. So, you know, if you're as particular as I am, that's out before. I'm not even listening to that one. Forget that, it's gone, I'm not using it. There may be some people who are really highly skilled at editing and can take the first part of a sentence, edit in another word, add 2 more words. That's not my skill, but some people are really good at that, and yay for you if you do. But I would prefer to have one clean read. So I know that before I even get to the end of it. I know if I've made a mistake. All right. You're also not listening to whether you sound cool or not, right? And cool is based on cool in your head. And so you don't want to judge yourself so harshly either. You know, so the goal is to get better and to get booked, right? So we got to get past those gatekeepers in order for all of this to happen. So unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, we have the tech to do it. We don't have to worry about the cans in the stream, right, with the little guy. All right, so you shouldn't try to pick apart your read, right? Don't just get really, really picky about it. What I want you to do initially, especially, is to listen broadly, right? Just kind of pull back away from it and listen in a broader sense. And when I say broader, not to be too detailed, right? So just listen broadly. Don't just rip and read, and definitely don't rush. The more you learn about the voice, specifically your voice, about where you place sound, do you place sound forward in the mouth? Do you place it forward in the nasal area? Are you putting it more in the head, or is it placed in the chest? Do you know where you place sound? Because you can specifically place sound in those different areas, and it completely will come across differently, right? It'll come across to you, it'll feel different in your body, and it will also translate differently to the person who hears you or who is listening, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that when it comes to connections. So you also need to learn about your habits, and these are habits that may be with your body, what you do with your body. You know, maybe you tilt your head or a certain way when you do something, if you're listening, or if you're just moving about day to day. That could have a definite impact on your voice. And the reason why that has such a great impact in your voice, whatever you do with your body, affects how you sound. And that's because there is a bone in your vocal tract called the hyoid bone, Hyoid. It's the hyoid bone, and it's the only bone in your body that is not connected to another bone. And so if you move your head to the right, now if some of you guys are taking notes, you may hear me. You could tell if I move my head, right? If I'm talking to you and I move, that's because of this hyoid bone. No matter what I do with my hands, my body, it is impacting my voice. So if you're doing something as a general habit on a daily basis, then it could be impacting how you deliver a script, right? Especially the head turns or what you may be doing on mic or off mic, right? And of course, mics matter a lot as well, whether you've got a omnidirectional mic or one that's very focused. So learn about your habits, what you're doing vocally and what you do with your body. Just take note so that you're aware. And then also just kind of think about what you do with the sounds that you make. Pitch. Does your pitch go up under certain circumstances? Do you always sound like you're asking a question? I have a friend who, when he's reading a script, and he's not a voiceover artist, he's just recording some videos, but whenever he reads a script, he always has this questioning sound. And I said to him, do you realize that's what you're doing? I'm not asking a question. That's what he said. I'm not asking any questions. I said, but it sounds like you are. And it only happens when he's on the mic and trying to record a script. It's really an interesting thing. But are you yelling into the mic? It may not seem like you're yelling, but it could come across to the person who's listening that you are. So know your habits and know your voice. The more you can know about your voice, the better. Also, things like, when is your voice the best? Right now, I am a night owl. You will probably find me awake 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning because I get so much work done then. My phone's not going to ring. Nobody's knocking on my doorbell, knocking on the door. So I'm usually up. Now, my voice sounds best probably between 11 p.m. and 3 or 4 in the morning, right? But if I go to sleep and when I wake up, that is not the best time for me to sit down and record anything because my body has been at rest and it's not warmed up, right? I've not been using it. It's just kind of a little raspy. However, I could use that to my advantage if I wanted to voice something that had a raspy sound or an unclear tone or a smoother texture. So I'm just aware of the fact that when I first wake up, I have that kind of texturized voice. And if I want the clear, high energy Cindy, that's going to be 11 p.m. till something in the morning. And that's just something I've learned over the years about myself. All right, so what are you listening for? This is key, right? So you are listening for connections. And these connections are really critical. There are different types of connections you might be listening for. And this is what I mean when I say listen broadly. First, you're looking for connections to the script, which may or may not be found in the specs. Now, I have done a lot of interviews. The second phase of my research is focusing on voice talent. So I'm also looking to interview some voice talent. So if anybody's interested, send me an email. I'll give you my email at the end. But I've interviewed at this point probably 150 or more voice talent, right? And I always ask them, what are some of the things that bother you about auditioning? And hands down, every single talent said the specs. They're confusing, they're unclear, they don't make any sense. And so I don't know anyone who's gotten scripts that said, oh, this is just so clear, I get it, right? Maybe once in a blue moon, but for the most part, the scripts don't match, right? So you might find a connection to a script and you might not. So make sure you read and understand the specs, each one, but you may need to look a little deeper after you read the copy and then you look back at the specs and try to make a connection between what the script is saying and what they're asking you for. And sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so what do you do in that situation? In that situation, I focus my attention on the script, right? Because if the specs aren't making any sense to me, there's no need in me fighting that battle. But I could find more clues in the script. And so I'll give you a really good example of this. I was working with a client recently, and he had a script that wasn't really about food, but we made a connection with him thinking about this restaurant and this particular type of sandwich that he got in Boston and how it was so delicious to him. Once he made that connection with, oh my God, this sandwich shop, and him describing to me what these sandwiches were like, okay, first of all, I want one now. I've never even been to this restaurant, but by the time he finished explaining it to me, I was like, I want one of those sandwiches. So that was the connection that we used, his connection with this particular sandwich at this particular sandwich shop in Boston. It had nothing to do with the content of it, but it was the emotion and the feeling that he got just thinking about it. And as he began to tell me about it, then we went straight into the script. It was a great read. It was a great read because he found that connection. Had nothing to do with the specs. Absolutely nothing. So you may need to look a little bit deeper when it comes to finding that type of connection. And then you also want to make sure you have a connection with your target audience, right? So there needs to be at least one person that you are delivering that script to. I ask talent a lot of times, well, after they do a read, well, hey, who are you talking to that? Oh, Hidden Valley Ranch commercial. Well, I was talking to everybody who likes ranch dressing. Okay, that's really not the group you should be talking to. You really should talk to only one person, right? Instead of like a group. That gives you more of an announcer sound. But when you talk to one person, you can tell that someone is being addressed. And the key is, if you get this person in your mind and settle it in your mind, then when you deliver that, people who are in that target area will think you're talking directly to them. And that's a real important key in making that connection between your target audience person, right? And then of course, there's emotional connections you can make. If you can tap into the type of emotion that is embedded into the script that may not have been directly focused on by whoever wrote it, but if you can make a connection, then it can really be to your advantage. So if there's an emotional connection, and then you need to make sure you understand the message and you personally have that connection to the message. Even if it's a product or something you don't like. I had a Febreze commercial once, and I was working with a client and she said to me, I hate the smell of Febreze. And I was like, oh boy, what are we gonna do now? Okay, well, what we do is don't think about it as the smell that you smell with Febreze. Make a connection with something that you think smells wonderful. And in your mind, we're just gonna make that substitution. It'll come across in your voice, but people in the audience won't know that you weren't thinking about Febreze as you're describing it. And again, it turned out really great. So these are the kinds of things that you have to listen for when you listen back to your recordings. This is a place to start, because if you can find these connections, then it's going to really make you sound amazing. Now, it's not that you have to have every single one of these for each script. So you may have a script that you make a connection just based on, for example, the sandwich shop or that sandwich. You may have another script where you can really hone in on who that target audience person is, right? That may not have anything to do with emotional connection, but you may have another script where you have an emotional connection and you're able to connect with that target audience, right? So it's not that you have to have all of these, although you do need to make sure you're communicating your message clearly, but you can use either one of these in order to get that, that connection that makes you heard and makes people really listen to what you're saying. So there are multiple ways to, as my dad used to say, skin this cat. All right, so the connections to the script, the target audience, and the message. And that is a mistake because that is the second repeat of that slide. Okay. Now, what can we do here? Understand the power that you have in your voice. And I am more than happy to share with each of you the Vocal Power 12 Radial Mind Map that I've that I have. I had one client who used the mind map and booked 2 national spots the first time he used it. So, you know, when you're in the booth, someone always is going to say, oh, that was great, but can you give it to me a different way? And a lot of times we think that we're doing something different, but really we're not, right? So if you can just look at the map, the mind map, pick something you want to change, then you can easily make that change. So say, for example, they say, oh, that was great, Cindy, can you do something different? I may just choose to change the pace, or I may choose just to add more pauses, or maybe I'm going to do something different with articulation or the way I pronounce a certain word, or maybe I'm going to change the parts of a script that I emphasize. So if you can understand your voice through the Vocal Power 12 and you understand what elements you most rely often on, then that can be a good tool for you to be able to use. And, you know, these are just suggestions of how you might be able to connect your voice with how you hear. So if you know that you have a certain rhythm or a cadence in your voice, naturally, that's a habit that you have, then that could work to your benefit if you just change the pace of the rhythm. But that's understanding, again, back to your habits and what you normally do. So you can play with any of the elements of the Vocal Power 12. That is simply it's a JPEG file. And if you send me an email, I'll be happy to share that with you also. So, you know, the mental game of voiceover is really, really strong. And that is, I think, the most important part of voiceover. It's not physically what you can do, although what you can do physically is important. We have to get mentally that target audience person locked in our mind so that we know who we're communicating with and what the message is. But because we can all read, and I've never met a voiceover artist who had a bad voice. So you've got a great voice, you can read. Now, leave that alone and start working on other things, right? Fine tune your ear to develop those other things. And then that's just a matter of practicing and refining what you already can do. So that whole thing about the mental game of voice, you know, before you speak, something goes into your brain, your central nervous system, that allows you to verbalize that thought. Emotions happen first in the brain. And then depending on what your emotion is, your body and your voice react in very specific ways. So if there's something that really irritates you, then that's probably going to come across in the sound of your voice. And who knows, it's the way you heard that. Maybe it wasn't the way that it was intended, but maybe it was. If that's how you heard it and that's how you received it, then that's how you reacted or responded to it, right? It's like the client who said when she saw Febreze, it was like, oh God, not a Febreze commercial, right? And I said, well, if they're going to pay you 10 grand to do this commercial, can you kind of suck that up for a second? I mean, they're not really asking you to smell Febreze. Just saying, okay? She said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. So I can't remember what it was she substituted, but that was that. So on January 8th, you guys, I'm doing actually a class. So you can sign up. I think it's available. It may be available tonight or tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning.
Myhan, was that you saying something?
Yeah, so tomorrow morning around 6 a.m., all of our classes are dropping, including this one. So everyone can sign up for it then. These
Awesome.
spots are limited.
Right. So that's 10 a.m. That's on a Saturday. 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you want a copy of the radial mind map that has the Vocal Power 12 on it, please just send me an email to powerinyourvoice@gmail.com. I also have a document that can give you some tips on how to keep your voice healthy. And I'm also going to, I also have a listening checklist, right? So when you're listening back to your recording, then you can make sure you're checking off all those elements, right? Did you make a connection? Are you listening to it broadly? Are you not trying to figure out what you did wrong? So if you want any of those freebies, just send me an email and say, hey, Cindy, give me that, and I will be happy to share it with you. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I want to be able to take any of your questions that you may have. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, Mahan, can you help me out here a little bit?
I'm seeing a few people, but if anyone has questions, feel free to use the reactions to raise your hand, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions if you have any. The email is powerinyourvoice@gmail.com.
Powering your voice.
Let me put that in the chat.
Thank you for that, Mahan.
No problem.
I have a question.
Yes, Andy, hello.
Hi. So when you said, when you listen to your voice and the list of things that you said not to listen for, because we're going to listen a lot of different times, you know, when we record something, we listen a lot of times. So do you mean the first time you do a listen? Because there's gonna, like me, for instance, I may say a word wrong and not even know it until I'm ready to, like, you know, process it, or almost ready to send it, or have sent it. And the client says, oh, you said this word wrong. And I didn't even know it, even though I listened to it, you know, a million times. I didn't realize that word was wrong. But so that's not what I'm listening for the first time I listen.
Okay,
right?
so what I would suggest, if you've had that as a challenge, I would suggest listening first, just one time, but don't focus on this, right? If you listen to it and you want to make sure that you've got every word in the script, that's fine. But are you saying you mispronounced it?
No, I said the wrong word.
Oh, you just used the total wrong.
I mean, I'm saying, you know, and when that happens, I say my eyes and my ears have deceived me, because I listen to stuff a million times before I send it.
Right.
And if it comes back and they said, like the last time, the person's name was Philip Buckman, and I said Philip Beckham. And I didn't even realize I said the last name incorrectly until they sent it back to me, because I listened, I'm like, oh, I got that right, but I didn't.
Well, one of the things I do to make sure that I'm saying what's on the script, and that is important. A lot of people just feel like they can improvise and add whatever they want. Don't do that, because especially if it's a commercial read, that means that it's gone through their attorneys and they have thought about every single word, right? So you can't add stuff and take stuff out. But what I do is I go through it just one time and I listen for I'm making sure that I'm saying every word that's on the script, right? But that's not where I focus. That's only a one-time check. Then when I listen to it again, I'm listening more broadly.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's when I start listening for those other types of connections. You know, does it sound like I'm talking to someone, or does it sound like I'm reading?
Right.
Right. Because our skill as voiceover artists is to not sound like we're reading. Right. We want to sound like we're talking to somebody else. And because we're so nosy, right? People are so inherently nosy that they feel like they have to listen in on someone else's conversation, right? Eavesdrop. So that's kind of the way you get that is by, you know, talking to someone, right? And then they think that you're either talking to them or they're listening in on you talking to somebody else. Okay. So you can do that just once if that's a challenge for you.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
And that's really good. Yeah, that's really good to do for names. You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of scripts may not have names, and so we don't have to necessarily worry about the pronunciation. But if you're just using totally different words and you know that you do that, then I would just check it once, but don't live there, because that focuses your listening to be too narrow. Yeah, because I do a lot of voice of gods for awards programs, and there's always a list of names. And so I ask for the pronunciation, you know, and I listen to, you know, I get pronunciations off, you know, online sometimes, but that one particular name, I don't know why I got it wrong, but thank you. You're welcome. You probably just saw it differently. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Going back to me.
Scout has a question.
Okay, Scout, hello.
Hello. I just had a question for those of us who have had a pretty intense vocal shift, whether it's because of like illness or hormones or any number of things. Are there any like particular activities that you would recommend for those of us who are kind of trying to retrain our brains to hear our voices correctly?
Yes. One of the things I would suggest is a good vocal warm up with just breathing, right? Do you know where your natural pitch is? If you know where your natural pitch is, then you can make adjustments. But that breathing exercise, and this is a really simple thing where you lay on the floor, flat on your back, and you put your knees up so there's not pressure on your lower back, and you just breathe from the lower body. It's interesting that when you're in that position, it's called a supine position, flat on your back on the floor, you naturally breathe from the right spot, which is lower in the abdomen. You know, the problem that most of us have is we do this upper chest breathing, right? So if I said, take a deep breath, everybody goes, right? Not good. But if you are laying on the floor, on your back, you can't do that. And that was one of the things I had to learn that caused my pitch to be too high, is that I was either holding my breath or not taking a deep, full breath. And when I did take a deep, full breath, it wasn't a lower body breath. And have you noticed that I didn't say diaphragm?
Yeah.
That's because your diaphragm is higher in the body. So I always teach lower body breathing, right? So your diaphragm is actually the floor to your chest cavity and the ceiling to your abdominal cavity.
Okay.
And to try and breathe from there, first of all, most people don't even know where their diaphragm is. And I was talking to one vocal coach and they said, well, you know, it's lower body. That's what I meant, lower body. I'm like, okay, well, why didn't you say lower body? Don't say diaphragm. But if you learn to breathe from the right spot, Scout, then that's one good way of warming up your voice that takes really no effort. That is a great warm up, just to breathe from the lower body, inhale in through the nose, slowly blow it out through the mouth. Because what it does is it calms and relaxes the body. And the best voice that you can possibly produce comes from a relaxed body. So the more you can get yourself relaxed. So there are some vocal warm-ups. When I teach warm-ups, I teach them in 4 parts, because that's a full vocal warm-up, right? Remember I said something about respiration, phonation, resonation, and articulation. I have warm-ups for each one of those areas. How do you warm up your respiratory system? How do you warm up your phonatory system? How do you warm up the articulators? How do you warm up your resonators? There are very specific things you can do to make that, make them all warm and function well. But the best thing is to get that lower body breathing, because it puts your body in a relaxed spot. It's a weird feeling if you're totally, if you're breathing properly, because you'll kind of get a feeling, it's kind of like a euphoric high. Because what happens is you're sending oxygen throughout your body and it calms, but it also energizes. So that's kind of a weird feeling, you know, to be calm and still have energy. Then you want to go do something. But that's really the best voice right there. And that'll get you to your natural pitch. Now, the other thing you can do is when you're checking for your natural pitch, if you can just put your hand behind your ear and cup it this way, then it's going to force your ear to kind of move out, so you hear yourself differently. Right?
Okay.
So if you say something,
yeah,
did you just shock yourself?
yeah, I did actually.
Because you're not used to hearing yourself that way, right?
Right. And like the other thing is that my voice has shifted enough that I'm noticing it without doing that. So I'm like, okay, I know where I used to be, but I don't know where I'm at now.
Where you are now. Yeah, I get it. So that's just going to take you listening to your voice. If you can do this a couple of times throughout the day, just cupping your hands around your ears like this, it helps you find your body's natural pitch, because you can actually hear it differently. So what happens is when you're just listening to yourself, This is why you are an audience of one.
Right.
Okay. When other people listen to you, they don't hear what you hear because you're listening to yourself through your bone, blood, tissues, muscle, through all of this, right? But when they listen to you, it's your sound, the sound of your voice comes straight to their ear. It's got to go through all of this stuff in your head, right, for you to be able to hear it. So you're the only person who hears you the way you do. Right?
True.
So when you're doing voiceover, you want to be able to, it doesn't really matter how you hear. The hearing and the listening that I'm talking about is to help you get a more effective sound to force other people to listen to you.
Okay.
Right? So I understand what you're saying because it can kind of be confusing, right? If you've made a change or you're in a transitory situation where your pitch or tone is changing, right? And that happens just in life too, because if you're taking a flight, the altitude is going to affect how you sound or how you hear. You know, sometimes your ears get stuffed up, right? So that can have an impact. Whether you're fully hydrated or not has a great impact. So make sure you're drinking enough water. Right. Not the sweet drinks, sports drinks and all that kind of stuff. Look, I saw you gave yourself away there, Scout. I saw your eyes.
I have no poker face except for when I'm actually playing poker. Don't ask me how that works.
Yeah, all those things impact the sound of your voice. So don't rely just on you, because you can get your voice. It doesn't matter what your voice is sounding like when it goes out. It's how they're hearing it and how they're receiving it. You see what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So you can use all those voices to your advantage. You've got like probably multiple characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can fine tune and learn like each one of those, you can use all of those sounds to your advantage. Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
We have another question from William.
Yes, William.
I don't know if you want to.
Okay, here I am. I have a quick question. There's been a lot of, what's that?
I said hello.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you. I have a question about headphones. When recording, oftentimes when I'm on remote session, I do use them, and oftentimes when I'm recording, I use them as well. Would you say that is a good or a bad idea overall?
I think
there's
that's
a lot of
good
debate
idea
about this. What's
yeah,
that?
I think, while you're recording, I think it's a good, necessary idea. However,
Really?
yes,
Okay.
Because you can't really hear what you're doing without them. I used to like to record without them, but then I got some good headphones. I got some good headphones and that kind of changed the game. Okay. All right. That's one thing. But here's the thing about the headphones. You use them while you're recording, and as you're recording, you're going to hear yourself a certain way, right? Then when you listen back to that recording, listen to it once with the headphones, take the headphones off. And then that's when you get into that broad listening where you're not just really focused on that. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the difference between listening to music with great headphones on versus listening to music in your car. When you listen to music in your car, that's more broad listening.
Right.
And you're hearing lots of other things. But then when you put those headphones on, that really gets you focused. And when you're listening to make sure you're communicating all those messages and making connections within the script, you don't want that type of focused listening.
So do you listen to it on your monitors, are you saying?
Yes.
Because I know when you do the before you send it out, you really kind of have to clean it up, and which sometimes you can't really hear the stuff, the editing that you need to hear when you play it through the speakers.
Right. However, let me ask you this. When you are trying to clean it up, what kinds of things are you listening for then?
I'm listening for clicks or anything, sibilance, and plosives, those sorts of things.
Right. So that's good to listen for when you're cleaning it up. But when you're just listening to find out, is this a good recording to submit as far as the script and making the connections and really being a good voice talent, do that before you get to the pops and clicks and syllables.
Ah,
Do you see
okay.
what I mean? So,
Yes, I do.
yeah, so you don't want to even take the time to go into that focus type of listening for editing until you've listened for connections.
Right.
Did you get the message across?
Right.
Is this a good audition? Because the
Right.
technical stuff is, you can do the technical stuff easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem there.
Yeah. So that's the very last thing you do.
Because this has been a debate that's been going on for a long time. People say you should never record with headphones, da da da. And that you hear people all the time say that this is a mantra. And I found out that I give much better performances when I have the headphones on, because I can hear when I make a mistake. I can immediately hear it and then correct it without having to go back and record it again. So to me, it's a big time saver. But a lot of people just say, don't ever wear headphones when recording. And I'm like,
Yeah, I heard both of those. And what I would suggest to you, just kind of as an experiment now, as you're starting to train your ear for listening to specifics, do a recording without your headphones and then do it with the headphones. Compare and see how different they are, because you probably will sound different.
oh, absolutely. But I feel like when I record headphones, I feel more connected to what I'm saying. When I listen back, it's like, wow, this is exactly what I intended it to be. And when I don't have the headphones on, it's kind of 50-50. It could go either way.
Right.
You're not hearing it the way you should be hearing it. And so that's why there's a sort of disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
But if you feel most comfortable listening to yourself, and you've probably tuned your ear to listen that way while you're recording, but I would also suggest and encourage you to listen without a couple of passes to see if you made those connections in a broader sense.
Right.
And then you put your headphones back on and say, was that really true? Was I really right about that?
That is wonderful to hear. I thought it was the only one that was wearing them. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to wear them because they work for me, but if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But to hear you say that makes me feel like, okay, I was on the right track the entire time.
Yeah, it really gives you, the headphones really give you an opportunity to have focused listening.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And that's good. But you also need this broader, less focused opportunity to make sure you're making a connection. And I think that's one of the reasons why people don't get booked as much, right? It doesn't make you stand out from everyone else.
True. Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people don't like to do it because it takes extra time. But I think listening to yourself for those connections is time well spent, because everybody's reading it. Now, I hate the notion of rip and read.
Yeah.
Because you haven't given yourself a chance to really do anything. You're not creating a backstory. You're not making any connections with the script. You don't even give yourself a chance to understand if there is a connection that you can make.
Yeah. And then you're missing out on potential audition opportunities by not taking the time to really do it correctly.
Exactly. And you get in bad habits.
Yeah.
Because remember, all of the things that make your voice work, those 4 systems, respiration, phonation, resonation, and articulation, are all connected to muscles. And muscles have memory. So whatever you start doing, right, these are all muscles that are working together.
Right.
That's why I say you really need to find out what your habits are. Because, for the longest time, I was doing this all the time because I was listening, Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing for me. I had to stop doing that because I was turning my neck, and it changes the resonance in my vocal tract.
Oh, okay.
So, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I did an interview with this exercise physiologist once, and he said, "Hey, Cindy, why are you holding your breath?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm not holding my breath." "Yeah, you're holding your breath." We actually got into an argument about it. I said, "How can I possibly be holding my breath? I'm sitting here talking to you. I'm alive. I'm breathing." He said, "You hold your breath when you listen." And he was right.
I do the same thing. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. You forgot
It
to
was
breathe,
shocking.
Bill. You forgot to breathe.
You
Yeah,
forgot to breathe.
yeah. Wow.
Not good for your voice. And it was causing me to have a lot of tension in my neck, upper back, and I was always having headaches.
Wow. Yeah, I
I
didn't know there
wasn't
was
getting
such a
enough
deep
oxygen.
connection. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all this stuff is connected.
Well, this is the first time listening to one of your things here, and Ted, I'm really blown away. You're just amazing, and I definitely
Well,
will
thank
be
you.
working with you in the future for sure.
Yay. Reach out anytime.
All right, you got it.
Myhan, do we have any more questions?
I saw one more question, and it was if you had any tips or tricks or techniques to train yourself out of saying things like and and
Oh,
kind of those things.
those are verbal crutches. And verbal crutches are definitely a part of our communication, right? The thing is, they're not a problem until you've got people who start counting or making tick marks as to how many times you say it, right? But one of the things that one of the tips I can tell you, because I teach this a lot when I teach public speaking, and all that kind of stuff, is to think about what you want to say before you say it. There's only one person I've heard who doesn't have hardly any verbal crutches, and that's Oprah. I don't think I've ever heard her say or That's kind of crazy, right? But I mean, who knows how her brain works? But I think the most important thing is, first of all, you have to be aware that you're doing it. A lot of people are doing it just like crazy and they don't realize it. So again, back to knowing your habits. If it is something you do a lot, try to slow down. You know, if you are speaking too fast, it's the body's way of giving you an opportunity to think about what you're trying to say. So instead of saying it, just stop. Like, I really want to say it right now, but I'm going to stop, figure out what I want to say, and then I can move on. But that takes some practice. Most important thing is to realize that you're doing it. So if you ask that question, maybe that's what you're doing. Learning your habits. You can also ask your friends or family because they listen to you all the time, right? Anybody else questions? If you guys want the radial mind map, email me. If you want the Keep Your Voice Healthy guide, it's kind of an extensive PDF document about all the things you can do to keep your voice healthy. If you want to reach out for coaching, you can certainly do that. And definitely, I would love to see you all in the class in January so we can nail down some goals and make sure we're hitting our voice goals for the year for 2022. Right? It's time to get booked. Anybody with me on that?
I love it. 2022, time to get booked, everyone.
Time to get booked, baby.
We're gonna frame it. If no one else has any other questions, that's it for the night.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Dr. Cindy, for your time.
Thank you, Myhan, for helping me.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, everybody, for coming and asking questions.
All right.
I hope to see
Thanks,
you again
Cindy.
soon. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays.
Cindy. Have a great night.
You're welcome. You too. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, everyone.